I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman, Chairman of the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee. The American Fire Service is rich in tradition and culture. A firefighter's life is filled with many emotional highs and lows. Stories of major fires, national disasters, medical calls, firehouse living, and family life are often verbally shared from one generation to another. Many times these stories are lost forever when a firefighter passes away. In an effort to preserve these stories, in 2019, the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee launched a new program of recording audio-video of our retirees' lives. These stories will be shared on our website, gfhbc.org. In 2020, we did not record because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please listen as these firefighters share their life experiences with all of us.
All right, my name is Sid Wray Jr. Most people in the fire department know me as Sid, and my friends. I do have a nickname that hardly anybody on the fire department knows, but my family and a lot of my friends call me Pete. Yeah, Pete. That was hung on me when I was just a little kid. But when I started to school, my mother, no, we're telling him his name is Sidney. So anyway, Sonny Mitchell and I have had a few discussions on that. We were never really that fond of that name, but anyway, so not everybody knows me as Pete, but a lot do. I was on the fire department for 28 years and 2 weeks, I think it was, just a little over 28 years. And I retired as a company officer, rank of captain. I'm from Guilford County. Worked in Greensboro, never lived in Greensboro, but I was born at Old West Long Hospital behind Central Station, and I've lived all my life in the southeast part of Guilford County. I am related to a couple that were here years ago. One was named Les Ray. He was my second cousin. I'd never seen him before in my life until he showed up at Station 11, and Jerry Branson said, "Boy, come up here and talk to your kin folks." And I went home, and everybody, when I came out of training, asked me, "Are you kin to Les Ray?" I think he was kind of somewhat of a character. I think he stayed on maybe 8 or 10 years, maybe something like that, and left. But anyway, I would always tell him, I said, "Well, now as I know of, I've never heard of it." So anyway, finally I asked my dad, and I said, "Have you ever heard of a Les Ray?" He said, "Leslie?" Like that. And I said, "Well, yeah, that's his name, William Leslie, I think." He was in that old 1959 picture that used to hang up there at Central Station. And so anyway, come find out I was kin to him. And related to that, I'm sure some of you remember Steve Wray that was here. He was a first cousin to Les, which made him a second cousin to me as well, but he left about the time I came on, and I didn't know him really. I met him a time or two. He was a friend of Barnett's, and I met him a time or two, but when I joined the fire department, that was May 16th, 1975. I was single. I was actually still living at home. I had just finished 3 years at UNCG. Saw college graduates beating the bushes for jobs. This opportunity came along, and as I've said several times, I was tired of being broke and tired of going to school. So I came to work for the fire department, where I was still broke and still going to school. But anyway, I was single, still living at home, basically. I did work for Lambeth Construction Company, which used to be in Greensboro years ago. Nobody probably remembers that nowadays, but they were grading and utility contractor, and I came from there to the fire department. The process when I was hired, I came to Central Station. I actually, even though I was from near Greensboro, you know, right at Greensboro, but I didn't know where Central Fire Station was, because to me, when I thought of fire department, it was the volunteer fire departments in the county, because that's what I saw, and I'd never seen a city fire truck on a call. I knew of a couple city firemen, but from my area, and didn't really know them that well. Jack Frettle, Robert Andrews, but anyway, I went to Central Station, talked to Chief Powell, who was the first deputy chief at that time. I actually went in the summer of '74, and he said, late summer, and he said, well, we're hiring a class, but we pretty much got who we want hired. He said, if you're still interested, we're planning to hire again in the spring. So I guess February, March probably, or something like that. I came to see him again. I was hired for that class. I don't remember a lot more about the process, other than they did send an officer. In this case, it was at that time Captain Hilliard, Clarence Hilliard. They would come around to talk to your wife if you were married, and say, okay, look, old Rocky is not going to be home every Sunday. He's not going to be there to go to Granny's at Christmas and Thanksgiving necessarily all the time. He's going to be gone every third night. If you a little anxious about staying home by yourself, then mostly by yourself anyway. But anyway, you know, this may not be the job for you. But anyway, in this case, he went by the numbers. He talked to my mother, so you know, he was just fulfilling that goal to speak to a family member, I guess. And so I do remember him coming to my home place there, but all I did was, he greeted me when he got there, and he said bye when he left, and because he wasn't there to talk to me. But and he wasn't there long. Like I said, if it had been my wife or something, that it would have impacted more. Yeah, but it didn't take long, and that's pretty much what I remember. We were all hired at the same time. We were probably second or third class, probably, that were all hired at one time and started training the same day. There were 16 hired in my training class, and there were 12 of us that made it through. A couple of guys are deceased. The guys in my training class are deceased now. One being Tommy McNeil, another one being Wayne Snyder. Also in my class was Brad Cox, Wayne Weatherman, Robert Grunman, Rick Gentry, Larry Borders, Jesse Walker. Again, it was a pretty serious time. There was one time and I can laugh about it now, but I wasn't going to laugh about it then. I got ready to come to the training center, and my car would not start. And I immediately went into panic mode, because, you know, as any fireman knows, the first rule is thou shalt not be late for work. So here I was in training, so after trying to get my car started, I jumped in my dad's old, well, it wasn't old then, but 66 Chevrolet pickup truck, and I bounced my way all the way to town, and I came in the training center driveway. Some of the men would, or the firefighters would remember that it was before Station 1 was built, and I just barely missed old chain link fence. That was when I turned in off of Church Street. And when I turned in, Chief Kent had lined all the recruits up outside the garage, and they were waiting on me to give me a nice welcome. It was right at 8 o'clock. I mean, it was striking 8 o'clock, and I was afraid that well, it's probably curtains to the kid here. But anyway, they didn't fire me, but I wasn't late ever again either. I had a backup plan. Well, I have no regrets really in coming on the fire department. I didn't know at that time really what I wanted to do. There's a lot of law enforcement in my family. My dad, one of my brothers, I had several cousins, uncles that were in one form of law enforcement or the other, and I thought, well, I don't know what I want to do, so that's probably going to be it. And I got sidetracked, and I've not looked back from that. I've not made a lot of good friends, and it was a good job. I never missed a paycheck. I've told a lot of young guys this: never missed a paycheck, never got laid off. So it was a good experience. Like any other job, there's maybe a day once in a blue moon that didn't go to suit you, or decisions that were made that you didn't really agree with, and so forth. But that's part of any job, and so it was all good. My class was assigned to Central Station, all 12 of us, as rovers. We were hired to open Engine 15, and all 12 of us rode for about the first probably 3 months. Actually, my first day was at Station 7, and the captains were not there that day. I think maybe one out sick and one off vacation or something, but I remember who was there pretty much. Kyle Stewart was the driver, and he was acting captain, and Danny Nelson, Danny Shoemate on Engine 7, Truck 4, I came to find out had been there for maybe about a year. We rode, that was my first day on the fire department. After that, I spent, Brad Cox and myself both spent 2 or 3 months down at Engine 3 with Brother Larry Cockman, who was the driver down there at the time. But anyway, and we really liked it at 3. That was like a neighborhood station, and 75% of the cars that came up and down, it was by that time on Yanceyville Street, and 75% of the cars that came by, they tooted the horn, put up their hand, probably, and transfer list came out, and Brad was going to Engine 1, and I was going to Engine 2, Central Station, and we said, golly, why couldn't they just left us here? That sure would have been nice. We like it here. Golly, we got to go to Central Station. Got up there and loved it. Ralph Sutton was my first captain. O.C. Johnson was the driver, Bob McLean, and myself. My first captain, Ralph Sutton, as I said, was, I think he came on the fire department about 1955 or so, something like that, so he was a well-seasoned veteran. He was good to work for, enjoyed it. I had never met him before, but he happened to be my brother's father-in-law's brother, so I was not kin to him, but came to know his family because of that. But he was good to work for, and as well as a lot of the officers, the captains I worked for. OC, I enjoyed working with OC Johnson, O'Neill C. Johnson, I guess I should say. He was pretty good with young guys. He would kind of encourage you, work with you. He helped you to take pride in what you were doing, and so forth. And again, it was all new to me, and that worked pretty well. Some of the pranks and so forth, and some of the funny stories. I guess you could call this a funny story. But my first day at Central Station, I met Joe Smith. Had recently, I think, become the driver on Engine 1 up there, and Joe, when I was meeting some of the guys, Joe was leaning against the old rescue truck, old Rescue 2, that parked outside the kitchen there on the apparatus floor. And he was leaning up against the hood, and he stuck out his hand and said, "Joe Smith." Okay. I said, "Yeah, right. I'm John Doe. How you doing?" And he said, "No, really, my name's Joe Smith." "Now, sure it is." He said, "Yes, that's what it is." And, you know, or some of us wore name tags with a dress uniform, but a lot of times on the Blues with work uniform, he didn't have a name tag on anyway. So, but anyway, he finally convinced me that he was Joe Smith, and because I figured they were going to be locked and loaded and just ready for this new rookie, you know. So anyway, I was the prankor, I guess you'd say, the instigator, but the biggest majority, I was the prankee. I was the victim. And there was one here again, one good one, Brad Cox here recently reminded me of it, but after, this was my second time at Central Station, and they had moved Truck 2 out to 10, and they rearranged the beds. Used to sleep in companies, and when there was 4 companies up there, but they rearranged the beds, and they were against the walls, and mine was against a radiator, old steam radiator against the outside wall. And as was fairly typical, I was one of, or usually about the last one to go to bed. So anyway, I come tippy-toeing in there, it's dark, and lay down in the rack there, and I started hearing something, ooh, a noise, you know, ooh, like that. Again, I heard the noise, and we'd had a chief officer up there filling in for Chief Price just a couple shifts before, and he'd had a nightmare. And I know Captain Scott came out with his little Boy Scout flashlight and went back in there and checked on him, but it woke some of us up. And anyway, I thought, well, what's going on? Is something happening again? You know. So anyway, I heard this noise, and I said, I got up and I sat up in the bed, and I looked around trying to listen for it again. I said, darn, that's coming from the head of the bed. And so I turned around and got up on my knees, and I was all over that radiator. I said, that's not a radiator noise. I don't know what this is. But anyway, Brad Cox was in the rack next to me, and I think he was about to bust open. He was having to stifle laughter, and he did a good job because I didn't hear him. But anyway, Joe had taken a garden hose. Actually, it was a hose they used to clean the bathroom and the shower up there. And he had strung it from his bed down there up to mine, run it up in the radiator, and tied it off right at the head of the bed, and packed the end of it with baby powder. So I hear this, he's going woo through that hose, and I hear that, and I get up there and I said, I got to find out what this is. This is crazy. And I got just right in the line of fire, and all of a sudden, whew, cloud of white dust. I mean, they got me. The Phantom got me. The Phantom, he always succeeds, and he did that. But and I thought Brad was going to roll out and fall out of the bed. I mean, awfully hee-hawing. And anyway, I tracked that hose down there to Joe. So I had a face full of baby powder. So again, like I said earlier, I was the victim of more than I instigated. But anyway, it was all good. Every company that I was ever on, every station cooked and ate together, which I come to believe was a pretty important thing, you know, because we had a very unique job, similar to the military, I guess. I was never in the military, but similar to the military, and of course the rank structure and so forth was paramilitary design. But anyway, you know, you sleep beside your fire truck, you eat beside your fire truck with all these other guys, you play the pranks, you have your classes, and you answer your calls, and you're all doing those things. And I think it just kind of promotes the team effort and somewhat of a closeness. You know, firemen are like any other people that, you know, there's going to be one once in a while that don't get along with this one and that and so forth. But for the most part, you know, everybody did their jobs pretty much, and we got along. So again, there was one time when I got promoted and went to 10. Charlie Thompson did all the cooking and did a great job. But we paid in and as I recall, maybe paid for his, I guess. But anyway, he was a willing cook, and so there was about a year there when I was working with him that, you know, we didn't have cooking duties. First came on, the cost of the 2 meals a day was, I think it was $2. And the last company I was on before I retired out there at 10, we pretty well ate for $5, which was pretty good even in 2003 when I retired. We were pretty frugal about it. All the guys were on the same wavelength. They all took their turn and didn't complain cooking, and they pretty much, we had a little kitty. If we went over, like most stations, if we went over, we supplemented. If we had a little left over, it went in the kitty. So $5, so $2 half a meal, that was pretty good even then. I didn't claim to be the best cook. I think it was pretty edible, the stuff I put out there. I was on for a number of years before I really learned to cook. And but you know, it's kind of like the old firehouse sayings that, you know, we're not trying to fatten you up, we're just trying to get you by. And I got them by anyway. I do remember, again, shortly after I got out of training down at Station 3, I had to call my mother. Again, I wasn't married, and I had to call my mother a time or two and get some coaching. And I've got to say this. Bobby Shane was the driver on the shift I was on, and he was sitting in there. I was trying to get something cooked for supper, and it called for crunching up cracker crumbs, soda cracker crumbs, and I could not find it. Called for 1 cup, and I could not find a measuring cup anywhere. So anyway, I take one of the coffee mugs and I fill it up, and I carried it in there to the bedroom, TV room, and I said, Shane, I said, does that look like a cup of cracker crumbs to you? About a cup of cracker crumbs to you? I didn't realize how stupid that sounded, but anyway, he looks up at me and kind of with a scowl and says, well, just what the hell does it look like to you? I said, right, gotcha, it's a cup of cracker crumbs. I tucked my tail between my legs and went back to the kitchen and did the best I could. But anyway, no, I wasn't the best cook in the world, but I was paired, again, down at Station 11, I was paired with a good cook, Jerry Branson. And he claimed, he would tell people that I was a great partner because all I did was lay on the bench there at the kitchen table and watch him and stay out of his way, and that's what he wanted me to do. And I would try to defend myself and say, well, look, I wash his pots and pans and I peel his potatoes for him and all that, but I'd been on the fire department a few years before I really learned how to put a meal out there. My favorite dish to cook, really, I don't know that I really had one, but the one I was famous for out of 10 was, again, you've got to put cracker crumbs to sort of stretch it and so forth, and I guess I didn't get it mixed good. And in the middle there, after taking it out of the oven, you cut into it, and it was just a snow white mass, and that come to be known as Sid's famous foaming meatloaf. So Robert Robertson had come on the fire department, just not been on long, and of course, every time he sees me, he has to say something about that foaming meatloaf. And Andy McFarland and all those guys, Andy was my driver, and they just really really razzed me about that. So I don't know that I really had a favorite one, but I was famous at Station 10 for that one. But you ask about hobbies. No, I never really had a hobby. I played golf half a dozen times, and when I first came on, and never played golf before, and the enjoyment in that was just everybody yah-yahing at one another, and I got a couple stories about that, but I won't go into them. But anyway, I didn't really hunt or fish. I've done both, but not a lot. And we slept before I was promoted to captain. We all slept in a big dormitory-style bedroom, and which I think was good. Nowadays, I think the stations have been built with cubicles and so forth, and society has changed somewhat, people have changed somewhat, and maybe that's the best thing, and that's what works now, but the dormitory-style bedroom, here again, it was like everybody eating together, and if for some reason you were in such a deep sleep you didn't hear the beeper go off, when they were all getting up, you could at least hear the commotion, or somebody would grab you, holler at you, grab you by the arm or something, and wake you up. And there was a lot of things, a lot of stuff, a lot of pranks at night when everybody went to bed. But it was one of the fun parts of the job, and except for when you had a couple of big snorers, it was a little bit rough. But but anyway, we would throw toilet paper rolls at the blinds, you know, and to make a racket and this and that and the other, and try to get them to turn over or something. But you know, that wasn't a major problem. I have not visited the fire stations since I retired that often, that much. But I recall, as you know, when all the years that I worked, you had retirees coming by, and early on particularly, we always took time with them. Now later on, we were a little more busy, and the retirees would complain, say, "Hey, I've been by the station 3 times and y'all were never there." So that kind of became a problem with visitors, but I always thought it was important. I love to hear the retirees' stories. And I thought, you know, you could learn some of the history of the fire department, and some guys don't care for that, and they get bored with it, which is fine, but I was always interested in it, the things that happened before I came along, how they did things, and some of the stories they had to tell. Plus, I felt like you needed to show some measure of respect to these folks that came before you, and so I always thought it was important you're still a family in a sense, even though you're retired. So anyway, I think it's important. It just doesn't happen as much now, I guess. The first call I went on, again, the first day was spent at Station 7, and we had, that was the first call that I had, I believe. It was in ORD there, of course, and Station 7 was located in ORD, and the warehouse district and so forth, and had an alarm, I think it was, in the warehouse. There was nothing to it. So I believe that was my first call. I really don't remember my first working fire. I do remember this that happened when we were working down, Brad and I were working at Engine 3 down there when we first came on, as I mentioned earlier. And we had the pleasure about 2 o'clock in the morning of going to the Lint Hole, fire at Revolution Mill, just down the bottom of the hill there. And firemen called it the Lint Hole. I think they called it, when the call came in, it said fire beneath the picker room or something, but it was you could drive the fire truck, you go around back and drive the fire truck up under the mill, actually. And the lint hole, it was duct work in there, and it was supposed to carry the lint out. And I guess it wasn't sealed up completely, and the lint accumulated, and once in a while it'd catch on fire. And it was never a roaring fire, it was just a smoldering fire. And the sprinklers would go off, so they had taken care of some of it, but it was the 2 times that I had been in there, one when I was at Engine 2 at Central, we were called out there, and it was about knee deep everywhere in water, and it was not a fun place to work, especially when it was, your first time there. But anyway, I actually, and I shouldn't get into this, but I actually, of course we weren't wearing Scots, at that time, and the smoke was not that thick, but over a period of time, I was a rookie. I was just out of training, and I wanted to show them that I was going to work. I would do my part. So anyway, I was on the nozzle 1.5 inches. Danny Nelson was backing me up. My captain was Bill Long, and anyway, Nelson said, "Sid, just go up here in this corner, knock some of that lint off the ledge, and smolder and everything." So we did that, and he said, "Okay, let's back out here and go over here." So anyway, I was trying to shut that nozzle off. And man, I said, "Golly," I said, "Shane's got too much pressure on this line or something." I couldn't hardly shut it off. And Danny Nelson told me later that I just kind of leaned into him, into his chest, just kind of like that, but my lights went out. Smoke got me. And anyway, the next thing that I remember is Captain Long is holding my helmet in his hands, looking down at me, and Nelson's got me by the coat, holding me up out of the water, and said, "Sid, bud, you all right, bud? Sid, wake up." So anyway, I woke up, and they got me up. Well, you had to cross under those great big ducts down the water and everything, and I made it probably halfway out or so, and my lights went out again. And so anyway, like I say, it was not really heavy smoke, it was just an accumulation over a period of time, and I was trying to work hard and everything, and I think I tried to fix a tuna casserole. I think that had been my day to cook, and that probably, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, that tuna casserole was probably working on me after supper too. But anyway, the next time I woke up, Kyle Stewart and Nelson and Bill Long, I don't remember who all now, they had me by the arms and legs. They carried me out there and threw me up on the bank, beside the fire truck. I'm still underneath the mill, and Chief Price, who was the line deputy chief at Central Station at the time, he was there, and he kept asking me if I wanted an ambulance or I wanted to go to the hospital or something, and I wouldn't have gone to the hospital in a million years. Not, I'm just out of training, and all these guys see this pansy going to the hospital, and couldn't do that. Nowadays, and later on, in my days as a company officer, I would insist, because we're just more aware of those things, and I would have insisted that they go be checked out. But no, I wouldn't have gone for nothing. But I felt a little better when I saw Brad Cox, who was my training mate there. They were toting him out. Shoemate and some of them were toting him out. So that made me feel a little bit better. But after that, when they started, several years after that, probably 15 years or so, they started the Medals and Awards Committee, because they never awarded any kind of medals for anything you did at that time. And but they started the Medals and Award Committee, and so I would start telling people when I was in front of Danny Nelson, and he still picks at me today about it. But I said I just couldn't understand why I didn't get a medal. I should have. I said, because I came out of the lint hole with one on each arm. Of course, I didn't mention the fact they were dragging me. I wasn't dragging them. But anyway, I pick at Nelson out there. We get a good laugh out of that. We started riding medical calls in the late 70s. The first couple of years I was there, we didn't ride any medical calls. We didn't ride that many wrecks. The wrecks we rode was because of the fire danger, or to try to dig somebody out of the car, and we didn't have anything to work with at that. Crowbars and pry bars and this and that and the other. Just did the best we could do. In December of '77, December 12th, I believe it was, they put the squads in service. And there was one in each battalion, 3 battalions at that time. So anyway, I was one of the original squadron, and we started riding, the medical calls, of course, then. And I don't have, well, there is one that I do recall because we were fortunate and brought the old gentleman back. But on Yow Road, we'd had a outbuilding on fire, and the old gentleman lived there. He was elderly, and he was standing in his driveway, and it just got the best of him, and he just croaked right there. And just Captain Spainhour, was captain on Engine 15 at that time, and he hollered at me and said, "Sid, come over here, come over here." I was on the inch and a half, and so I gave up the nozzle there and took off over there. Mike Henley, who was driving Engine 15 at that time, came in, and Tommy McNeil, who was my partner on the squad at the time, we started working on him, and he had no pulse. I mean, he was gone, and we pumped him back up, and I think he lived about 5 years. EMS took him on in. Of course, they did their thing with him. But we had the initial contact, and we were the ones that brought him back. So got a nice letter was sent by his son to the fire department, and Chief Hagler, who was the battalion commander at that time, he passed it on down. Other than that, nothing particularly stands out other than the fact that as all the squadmen experienced, and now the companies riding the medical calls, you feel bad for families when you go in and there's really nothing can be done. Mike Brown and myself had an older gentleman sitting on the edge of the bed when we got there, just up above Station 11. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. He should have called us at 3 in the afternoon, as happens. That's very typical. But it was, like I said, about 3 in the morning, and he was sitting there. I was down on one knee with a pad, questioning him about his medical history, his symptoms, how he felt, all of that stuff. And he's up here like this where he could breathe a little better. And Mike Brown was my partner. Well, Brownie started setting up, some oxygen for him. Before we could get that done, he took a couple big breaths and fell backwards on the bed. So we immediately drug him off, placed him on the floor, and started CPR and so forth on him. But it was that was the big one for him, and we couldn't do any good. Now that stuff like that makes you feel bad. We had one time a 14-year-old boy. We found him in a bedroom laying on a desk, and a .22 pistol laying there on top of the desk. That was a sad one. But you see a lot of stuff, and I was on the squad about 7 years, I think, and by the time I was done with it, I was, to be honest with you, I told one of my brothers, I said, I'm tired of seeing dead people and dying people. I said, I've about had enough. And luckily I was promoted off the squad, so that got me away from it. But you have to go on, as all firemen know. You have to keep on, carry on, and And another thing, let me interject this. The volunteer fire departments, wherever they may be, in the case of a lot of the ones in Guilford County, I think it's harder on those guys, I feel like, if you have a fire fatality or a medical call where you have a death, so forth. With us in the city, I really don't recall having a medical call or anything that involved anybody that I knew. As opposed to these guys and the volunteers in the county, you know, it may be their neighbor, it may be their cousin, it may be somebody they went to school with, it could, you know, all of these things that they would have to deal with, and that's got to make it a lot tougher for them. But it's tough for anybody. But the biggest fire, obviously, that was the biggest fire they had in Greensboro, I guess, April the 13th, I think, of 1985. It was the Davie Street fire, which involved about 8 commercial buildings. It actually started on the east side of Davie Street, and the companies from 7 and 4 answered the call initially. I was out of 10 at the time, and the fire actually jumped the street and involved those buildings on the west side of Davie. And it was, I think, about 11 o'clock. I had been off that day on some comp time, and I came in at 8 o'clock that night. But like I say, it was on a Saturday, and it was about 10 o'clock or a little after, something like that, as I recall. I mean 11 o'clock rather. And we got there. We actually moved. Ronnie Osborne was Captain on Engine 10, and we actually moved to Station 8 on our own because without orders, because everybody was tied up. They were, and the radio, you couldn't get before we had the frequencies that they have today, and we just had that one fireground frequency, and there was just talk all the time on that. So anyway, we then from 8 we got a call up there to where many long-time Greensboro residents know it used to be 5 Points, right there at the old Bluebell building around Lee and South Elm there. And anyway, we got a call of some embers dropping over there, and of course you could see the sky lit up from any direction. And we ended up there, and we got there, I think it was about 5 minutes to 12. And Chief Shoemake was the initial incident commander, and I was on truck 2 at that time, out of 10, and he told me he wanted me to back in here, and Engine 10 was going to supply us the ladder pipe to back in here and to hit the fire and so forth. Well, Chief Powell came along in his turnout gear. The only time I guess I ever saw the chief of the department on a fire, or in charge of a fire, and he came up and about jerked my shoulder off and said, "You put that truck right here and keep water on this unburned," it's kind of, I don't know what you would call it, but kind of a connector from the back of that building to a building that faced Elm Street. And he said, he was serious. Said, "You put that water right there and don't move it." And so anyway, I told Charlie McCoy, the driver, so Charlie backed up there and we set the thing up, and that's what we started doing. And Chief Powell also said, he said, "If we don't stop it right here," said, it's liable to jump Elm Street and you'll go to City Hall. You know, that was his words. So anyway, that's what they did. And John Dwyer was on my company, and he was up there, and like any fireman, he wanted to put the wet stuff on the red stuff. And he said, Captain, I went up there to check on him, and he said, "Captain, get Charlie to move me over just a little bit here." He said, "Man, I got a good shot." I said, "Johnny," I said, we wanted orders from the chief of the fire department. I said, put that order right there. And I said, I think he's right. That building right there is gone. It's history. But we might can save some of these. And it did. Our effort was part of everybody's efforts. I think Engine 8 was on the other side doing the same thing. I believe it was. But part of ours was, we didn't save the city of Greensboro ourselves. I don't mean it that way, but we were part of the general effort. And that was the biggest fire I think Greensboro ever experienced, and that's the biggest one I was on. That one of the guys that helped and took an interest in me initially, I think, was O.C. Johnson, who was a driver on Engine 2, and I was on the back of Engine 2. Another one that I worked with and became good friends with, J.C. Barr, a pretty quiet, behind-the-scenes type of guy. But Jake knew his territory, he knew his truck, he got along pretty much with everybody, and he wasn't afraid to share territory knowledge or help you or work with you on that stuff. So that's a couple. I guess there were others that, you know, that I did respect and look up to and so forth, and maybe was helpful. Or off the top of my head, it's kind of hard to remember back, but that's a couple that immediately comes to mind. I was never in the military. I was right at my age. I had to register. I drew a high lottery number, a very high lottery number, and it was Vietnam. It was in 1971, and Vietnam was winding down. The Vietnam War was winding down, sort of at that point, and I would have gone if I was called. I done made up my mind. I said, if I get called, I'm going. But my dad was a World War II veteran, and not just, you know, I thought, well, I need to go. But I didn't really ever think that I was in much danger of going. And anyway, Vietnam, to a lot of people, was a very unpopular war, a very political war. Of course, all wars are political, but so I never, I said, well, if they don't call me, I won't call them. So I didn't have any military experience. Sometimes I think I might have missed out on something, and then some guys that's been in the military say, you didn't miss a thing. I would like for the fire department to remember me as somebody that was honest and sincere, and somebody that I hope that I made the impression on people that I was fair-minded, had my opinions, which may have been correct or incorrect at times to others, but I would like to think that I was looked at as being a nice guy. You know, I didn't make a ton of rank or anything. I would have liked to, early on, I said I would like to have made battalion chief, because when I get old, I can probably handle that job if I can't handle the other. As it turned out, I did have a lot of back trouble, and I've had 3 surgeries on the neck and back, and one on my knee and so forth. So anyway, I did kind of wear out, but so I had to leave a little bit early, which was very fortunate that that retirement program was in place. But I hope that I will be remembered in a positive light. If I were to give advice to a new firefighter, one would be go to school. That was starting to become important. When I first came on, not so much maybe, but it got more and more important for promotion and so forth, and of course obviously for the knowledge that you would gain. But I would tell them, you know, to work hard, and, you know, just standard advice: work hard and keep your nose clean, and, you know, try to get along as best you can with everybody. You're going to cross wires with somebody once in a while. And I crossed the wires once in a while with maybe my supervisor, if something I didn't agree with, I knew that he had the last word on it, of course, but I would make my opinion known, and I tried to do that face to face, out of the, I didn't want to do that in front of everybody, but I just those things, be honest and trustworthy and be loyal to the job. Sometimes you don't feel like maybe the job was loyal to you at a particular time, necessarily, but you've got to believe in what you're doing, and it's public service, public safety, where you're paramedic, firefighter, police officer, whatever it is. It's an honorable profession. I would like for my family to pretty much remember the same things, that the fire department would. That I did my job the best I could, and that I was honest and trustworthy type of person. Now, and maybe not too hard to get along with. I did my share of picking and cutting up and so forth. And again, as I said earlier, I was the victim of a lot of that too. But of course, my family knows me better than anybody. But they kind of know where my heart's at and where make my mistakes just like everybody else, and said things that I shouldn't have and that sort of thing. But anyway, my family, I hope, so far I think they do anyway, remember me in a positive light. I would like to say that, as a final note, I don't really, looking back, don't have a lot of regrets or anything. I'm very fortunate. I think that the good Lord put this job in front of me and that I was able to get it. One of my proudest days was when I was hired, and then when I got out of training, and I was proud to be a fireman, and I made a lot of good friends, and a lot of good guys, a lot of folks on the fire department, and like I say, I'm glad for my experience here.
In closing, the Greensboro Firefighters History Book Committee hopes you have gained a greater insight into the dangers, the challenges, and emotional events that have influenced and shaped the American firefighter.